Council meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome on this sunny, bright first day of spring, and the sun is shining and it's still light out. So it's a good start to our meeting. Let the roll reflect that we do have one absent council member tonight. Councilmember Fulch is absent, and we have a quorum, so we can continue. Tonight we will be having a presentation for the Building Remembrance for Reconciliation, and Heidi Langenfeld is with us tonight to give us an update on what's been happening with BR4R. Welcome, Heidi.
Thank you, Mary. So, yes, we really appreciated the opportunity to be part of that, the Community Investment Fund. And thanks to that, Building Remembrance for Reconciliation was able to have a charrette process, and that involved having a number of artists come on September 23rd, and we met in the Art Space building, and they were told the story about Brown's Chapel, and from that they also were given our mission statement, and they spent the rest of the day planning and thinking about, well, first of all, they were shown the space that it has been designated by the Parks Department for the memorial. And this space, in case you just need a little help, in the background in the left corner is art space. And so this little corner of the Levy Park is right on the east side, and it's along Tyler Street where it turns into First Street. And it has this beautiful tree and a nice open space. So we all went down there and looked at the space together and went back into the art space gathering area there. And they came up with three different designs. Well, actually, I think 4. And so we had our goal for the public art project is to create opportunities for conversation and discussion about race relations in our community while addressing reconciliation, and we want it to be an attractive space for visitors, reflection, events, and exhibits. And we think this space is awesome, a space to do that in. What we're doing is looking for a public art piece that commemorates the Hastings early Black community and the congregation of Brown's Chapel, African Methodist Episcopal Church in Hastings that was destroyed by arson in 1907. Tonight I'm going to present one of our artist team's renderings that reflects their design concept for the space designated in this area. This is a work in progress and not a final concept. We'll continue to be working with the artist teams to further refine and develop the project in the next stage of the design process. James Curry, who is the chair of BR4R, would have been here this evening, but he has to work. And he has been working with the artists who were chosen through the charrette process. Members of this team, the artists are Micah Lee Anders, Christopher Harrison, and their advisor collaborator is these are all artists from the Twin Cities area, and Seytu Jones is working with them. So I'll go back to the artists. Micah and Chris provided this artist statement for me to use to explain to you what their idea is that you're looking at right here. The name of they titled their installation, Their Souls Run Deep. And I'm pretty much going to read this because there's parts of it that I don't want to miss out. So They say this piece was designed to celebrate the lives of Hastings' early African-American community. An important part of that community was the African Methodist Episcopal Church that they named Brown's Chapel. It was a space of their own where they could worship God without shame or fear. And in 1907, their church was destroyed by arson. This piece is also meant to commemorate that destruction of their sacred space, besides the celebration of the community that was here. The proposed sculpture includes 5 concrete benches with vertical upright backs resembling church stained glass windows, equally spaced in an oval shape with a curved wall reminiscent of a chapel at the head of the formation. This is another view of that. The window areas of the benches are designed to have transparent weatherproof polycarbonate sheets with African Adinkra symbols imprinted on them, referencing the heritage of the churchgoers. The idea is to have the paved concrete serving as a connective foundation for the sculpture. News quotes of the events from the time and names of the church families can be engraved in concrete throughout the piece. And you'll see they're showing it here how the shadows will show through those church window-like shapes behind the benches. The curved wall with a central window space for a transparent polycarbonate sheet is designed to contain a photo imprint of the congregation of the church, of the members of the church. And you have all seen that photo, I'm sure we've shown it a number of times. The outer faces of the benches and the curved edges, and the wood resembles the wood paneling of the church walls. So I don't know if you can see that, especially on that rounded place, but let me go to this. This design shows that in the background, the back part of these church benches, you can see it looks like the wood frame building. That's what that's meant to represent. The edges of the main curved wall will be slightly distressed to refer to the destroyed structure. You can see that in the middle one, the middle panel. The curved wall and benches will be made of poured concrete, which will allow for more intricate detail in form and for the addition of text. It is a very durable, low-maintenance material and will hold up well to weather changes. And the 3/4-inch polycarbonate panels that are used in those window structures there are strong, so therefore they're quite tamper resistant. So these are the 3, looking at this straightforward, and that's the last one. So they say it is vital to keep the stories of all Hastings early settlers in view and accessible to the public. The placement and approachability of this piece invite viewers to read the stories, see some of the faces of the Brown's Chapel congregation, and say the names of the early residents. The final dimensions will be determined by scale and judgment. So this is what they have provided me with for your to show you this evening. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And if not able to tonight, I'll get you the answers.
Thank you, Heidi. Council, any questions? Councilmember Liefeld.
Thank you, Honor. Heidi, when did you say all of the submissions need to be in by?
Okay, so we had.
So everything is in?
Everything, yes. So what happened that day, they all came up with designs.
Okay.
And then after that, there was a committee of our members who looked at their designs and chose these artists out of the others.
So I guess I apologize. Is the decision made, is that the piece that's going to be installed?
No, well, I mean, No, we're working, it's still in progress. But it's the one that these artists have come up with, and this is what they represent, what they've sent to us right now.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Heidi. Councilmember Lund.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just a small comment. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't expect that, and I was pleasantly surprised. I think that's really beautiful, really cool. So, thanks for sharing.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, well, thank you again for the opportunity to
Of course, yeah, look
do
forward
this.
to see the
do the
final-
process of search and,
Yeah,
okay.
be great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thanks. Council members, are there any corrections to the minutes from the March 6th meeting? Okay, and at this time, we'll take public comments from the audience. Is there anyone wishing to speak to the council at this time? And anyone on Zoom? No one on Zoom. Okay, council items to be considered. Councils, are there any items to be considered? Okay, council, I would accept a motion to add the DNR grants under parks as required by staff. Councilmember Fox and Councilmember House. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed to that motion state by saying nay. And that motion prevails. Council, I would accept a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Councilmember Pemble, Councilmember Leifeld, any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, council, state by saying aye. 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 Opposed to that motion, state by saying nay. And that motion prevails. Tonight, under Parks and Rec, we have a resolution for the DNR Outdoor Recreation Grant. And for this item, we have City Administrator Dan will explain, and we will have a motion after the explanation.
Thank you. Appreciate accommodating this as a late addition to the agenda. We had some questions and correspondence with the Department of Natural Resources late last week and missed the getting on the agenda timely, but the application deadline is before our next meeting, so I wanted to be able to move this. Actually, it's 3 separate resolutions, although they're all identical, but we would be seeking grants through the DNR's Outdoor Recreation Program for new playground equipment at Consemius, Pioneer, and Tuttle Parks. Our estimates are $200,000 at each park, $600,000 total. If awarded, the DNR grant would cover 50% of the cost, and 50% being a match requirement. We do have cash for park improvements available that could cover that. So if there's thoughts we're getting ahead of the budget process, we can work with it. The other part I would point out is as we go through the budget process or a couple of upcoming meetings looking at our 5-year parks plan, if some of the priorities were to change, we could always pull an application or even, if it was awarded, even turn down the grant. So we've got some flexibility. Approving the applications tonight keeps the most options open for us. So with that, I can take any questions, but staff recommends approval.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Any council discussion? Councilmember Lund.
Your Honor, thank you. Dan, why are we choosing these 3 parks to be part of that? Is there, I mean, are the specifics of the grant to be for neighborhood parks? It just says outdoor recreation, so I'm just curious if there was a different project on the horizon that would be right.
The reasons for these is a matter of they're the ones that are next in line in our comprehensive plan. So when we lay out, it's not the same as approved in the budget, but when we lay out the comp plan saying here's the projects in 24, 25, 26, these are the ones that are next up. So
And I that makes sense. I guess my question is maybe spurred by one of the last sentences that says the grant is also highly competitive. So are we positioning ourselves best with 3 neighborhood parks versus something else that's on the, potential list of things, whether it's planned for or nice to have or whatever, that would be more aligned with the, the rubric of requirements for this. Just, you probably don't have that off the top of your head, but it, that's a,
That was certainly part of our conversations with the DNR last week. We were hoping that trail improvements would be eligible, but they're not unless it was trails specifically within the park. So we were looking at sort of a different priority than this. There's certainly needs throughout our system, and this would help tackle some of that. They are next in the CIP. I would also point out, although certainly competitive, we had similar funding for the playground at Lions Park a few years ago, and more than just the playground, but funding towards the Lake Isabel Park project, which is current too. So we've used this grant program in the past.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Lund. Any other discussion, Council? Okay, then I would accept a motion to approve the resolution authorizing application in Minnesota Department of Natural Resources Outdoor Recreation Grant for Cannabis, Pioneer, and Tuttle Parks. Councilmember Fox and Councilmember Pemble. Any additional discussion, Council? All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. 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 Opposed to that motion state by saying nay. And that motion prevails. Tonight, under Community Development, we have a second reading to adopt ordinance on the annexation, Best Development Property, Walden at Hastings, Trunk Highway 316 and Michael Avenue. For this item, we have an introduction by Community Development Director John Hinsman, followed by a potential action by City Council. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council members. So tonight, as the Mayor pointed out, we are asking for a second reading and adoption of the ordinance for annexation for the property listed here. This is a 71-acre property generally located east of Highway 316 and Michael Avenue, just south of the South Pines area to the north here. This is an area of property that has been designated for development within our comprehensive plan. And the developers of the property and the owner of the property, Best Development being the owner and Land Equity being the developer, are both seeking annexation of this property. We've had this consideration before us on a couple of different occasions in the past. Most recently, we looked at this last meeting on March 6th and had a discussion on some of the ramifications. We had some questions come up pertaining to traffic and land use and what happens within the process here. With the annexation that moves forward tonight, what we would be doing is extending the city boundaries. The land use that is entailed within that site would remain the same. That does not change at this point. Obviously, the land use being agriculture is not something that the developers are looking to have in perpetuity, but there's many other steps that we will be going through before we get to that point. One of the things we will be going through is an environmental assessment worksheet, which will be put together on behalf of the developer and reviewed by staff, as well as a number of other entities that have review authority over that. This is something that would look over a number of things, including some of the geology, water, environmental contamination, wildlife, fish, historic, visual, air quality, noise, and transportation. So those are some of the items in which the environmental assessment worksheet is required to address and what sort of impacts that this development will have on it. The transportation question has been one that's been brought up by a number of people, including the council here. And so the developer has made that commitment to do the traffic study. This would be by an independent third party, but it would be reviewed not only by city staff, our engineering department, but also by other entities that would have a stakeholder within this, including MnDOT. So those would be what would be happening down the road. Before this development that I'm going to be showing you here becomes a reality, there's a number of different steps that would need to take place. I mentioned the environmental assessment worksheet, which would come forward to provide impacts of the development and any mitigating factors that must be taken into consideration. And then there would be land use applications that would come forward after that, including a amendment to our comprehensive plan to change the land use from a low density to a mid-density designation, rezoning for the property, platting, site plan approvals. We get more finite with the details as we move down the road. All of those different acts by the city council will be prefaced by a public hearing to residents, so they would be notified of that similarly to what we've done in the past up to this point. So many opportunities for folks to come in and give comment on that as we move forward. I think an important aspect of this too is the developer is moving forward with this at his own risk at this point. We are looking at the annexation tonight, which is bringing the land in. The land would be agriculture. The developer is put together a concept plan, which you've seen before, and I'll go through a little bit here in a moment. But there's no obligation that the council is granting tonight through the annexation to anything within that plan. Obviously, if we're at a point where there's strong objections to what's in that plan, it would be good to hear those objections at this point. But your actions tonight on the annexation do not affect or do not approve any portion of that. If you come back at a later point and traffic or some other issue comes up, it's your discretion to say no to the specific plan that comes forward. So that's kind of a synopsis of where we're at. Like I've said before, we've had a number of different times that this has been reviewed. Back when the original annexation came forward in 2021, we had a public hearing and a first reading and a couple of times at the city council. And then when it was tabled at that time because the developer at that time went away, we tabled the issue to bring back when a new developer came forward, which we do have now. And the concept has changed, gone from 160 single-family homes to about 450 housing units of a variety of densities. So that has changed within here. With that new concept plan, we did have a neighborhood meeting that was conducted by the developer on that one, which we had about 25, 30 people attend. We did have the Planning Committee of City Council review this, as well as the Planning Commission of City Council review this as well, just to get a good indication of what those comments would be as we move forward in the development. So the development itself looks something like this, 450 units altogether. I'm going to go through this a little bit. We've got twin homes that would be towards the north end of the property. As we look here, this is where Michael Avenue comes in off of Highway 316, and this is a stub street that goes into the South Pines development at this point. As we move forward, there is a townhome section which would be located in this area. The townhomes themselves would have their front facing towards 316. This interior road here would serve more like an alleyway, so the garages and utilities would be in the back of this, while the fronts of the homes would either face 316 or towards this greenway in the center of the development. And then in the middle of the development, there'd be an active adult assisted living section of it, which would have a variety of different housing uses for senior individuals. Towards the back of the development, this configuration has changed, but it would be right now one apartment building kind of in an L shape like this. That would provide good views over the preserved area here, which is the Sand Coulee. Again, the area that we show here, the 50 acres would be developed, where the 17 acres over here would be left as is. And moving down to the southern part of the development, this would be a single-family detached housing model. And so that is really what we're looking at with the development. There would be a system of trails that would go through here and park-like amenities. One of the things that we will be doing upon approval is to ask the Park and Recreation Committee to review this plan again to see if there's any park dedication or park dedication fees or physical land dedications or whatnot that should be incorporated into this development. During the 160 home development previously, they opted to recommend cash in lieu of land. With the increased number of residences here, want to make sure that that has not changed. So that would be something we would be doing here in the near future on that. So that is how the development is set out. One other aspect of this development, too, is that the developer believes that this would be a rental community. Not sure if all the all of the housing units would be rental, or a portion of that would be, but his plan is to market it in such a fashion there. From a land use standpoint, we don't get into the business of regulating the status of rental versus ownership. We're in the business of looking at land use on that one. Understand that it's a concern and something that's being considered by individuals when they're looking at this development. From purely a land use standpoint, we're looking at the density and the layout of the development as we move forward with it. And again, what we're showing here tonight is a conceptual plan that the developer would bring forward for approvals more formally in the future. So that's what we have before us tonight. I believe the developer's representative, Rick Harrison, might be with us on Zoom if you have any questions directly for him. The developer, unfortunately, was ill tonight and was not able to make the meeting. So action before you tonight for your consideration is the adoption of the ordinance for annexation. With that ordinance for annexation, upon adoption tonight, we would take that forward to the state of Minnesota for recording, and then that would be made official at that point. So I could stand for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Council, any questions? Councilmember Liefeld.
Thank you, Your Honor. John, so just for questions from people around the community that have been asking different things, my question is, we talked about Summergate, who originally brought this in 2021. They backed off. Now we've got Land Equity Development. Does Land Equity Development currently own that property?
They do not. The owner of the property is Best Development. They've been the owners of the property for about 25 years or so. So they were the owner during the Summergate as well. So
Okay.
my understanding is there's a purchase agreement between Land Equity and the current owner's Best Development, that if certain items are achieved, that they would take ownership.
Okay, so for the last 25 years, a development company has owned that property with the idea of expanding it.
That is correct, yeah.
How long has the Tuttle property, when did that get built? Do you know offhand? I know I'm
Oh,
kind of
just to the
putting you on
north
spot.
there? That would be late 90s, I think, right around 2000.
So around the time that those houses were being built, did Best Development already own that property?
I believe so. I'm not certain of that. I know when I've talked to them that they had owned it for about 25 years or more, which would be right around the same time frame that development to the north was being constructed.
Okay. And then somebody must rent that from Best Development to farm it?
I believe that's the case. I don't know how that arrangement's made.
So right now, we have a developer who owns the property that's zoned agricultural, and all we want to do is talk about letting this developer eventually, maybe now, maybe not, because that's not going forward, to allow them to move forward in the concept by making this part of city limits?
Yep, that's correct. And with the development here, I've had conversations with Best Development over 20 years, and they've had desires to bring it in sooner. We've held off on bringing it in prior to any improvements to 316. Now that the improvements to 316 have been contemplated, we told them we would be open to looking at it.
Your Honor, I'd make a motion to approve to adopt the ordinance annexation of Best Development as written and presented by staff.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Liefeld. Councilmember Fox. Additional new discussion, Councilmember Lund.
Thank you, Your Honor. Okay, there's varying opinions on this, and throughout the community. Obviously, I think one of them is just the volume, right? We've talked about that. Like, I think context matters too. You mentioned 450 units roughly versus 160 roughly. Before it was 160 single-family homes. It's not apples to apples to say units, right? So one nugget of information might be nice to have going forward is to talk about it as beds or people that are, so inhabitants of the area or whatever. How much are we actually growing that from the original concept? And then also the mix, right? So traffic is of a concern. Well, how much of that percentage-wise or people-wise are actually people that are in that senior living or whatever that aren't getting up and going to work every day necessarily, or, you know, driving during peak times and whatnot. I'm just asking that we start putting some more of that context into these conversations, and, you know, not put it on you, put it on the developer to explain that, because I think even just, you know, even though I know about this, and I've, you know, more than probably the average person out there would, you hear numbers like that and it seems like 3x, and I think it's not exactly 3x. There's nuance to it. So enough said there, but I'd appreciate that. And then I've got just a couple things and I'll quiet, but the strong objections, again, traffic, that's the big thing that people are concerned about, you know. What are we adding stress to the system? What's that look like on off streets and whatnot? So, you know, I understand there's a good faith effort here of, you know, we're not committing to a specific development, but at the same time, it's kind of, you know, chicken and the egg, and you got to move, or you know, or you can't make you know, it's not going to work out for them. So, if we're incredibly opposed to that concept, then, you know, it'd be good for them to know, I think, is the idea. But I think most people would be opposed to something that's going to be significantly negative to the street systems and you know, traffic and so forth. So as long as that message is clear, they know that. For me, sticking closely to the plan as proposed at the point in which there is a plan proposed is important. This development may take a couple of years or several years to actually fully develop, and yes, things do change. But you know, we've run into some situations in other developments where you know, the growth of that land didn't necessarily happen maybe at the rate at which they'd hoped when they first kicked it off, and things changed, and then we get into kind of, well, that's not exactly what we thought we were going to get, and so forth. So just, you know, knowing that that's important, at least from my opinion. And then one more thing is the net benefit. So what I'd like to know, and I don't expect to have that information now, but what I'd like to know is what do we expect the tax revenue to be as an adder to the city, and how many new residents do we expect to bring into the city? Does that affect our school system? Is there, you know, a projected additional, you know, X students brought in because of this, so forth. Things like that would be nice to know, rather than just, hey, you know, housing's good, we need housing, because, you know, I mean, it's kind of easy to say, and at a certain point, we need to start understanding what that actually means besides just more buildings. And then let's offset that with any added liability. So it's nice to know we're going to get X million dollars over the course of time of revenue, but we also need two more fire staffed the fire department with 2 more people, another police officer. Public Works is going to spend X more hours, or we need 1 more truck, or whatever it might be, to serve that area. So I know there's a lot, but I think those things do help any concerns, and also help make a good decision for something like this. So thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Lund. Councilmember House.
Well said, Councilmember Lund. I appreciate that, because I've also had many concerns brought into by citizens and residents. And so my main question is I know on the south area, there are plans to do a fencing of that area if the development goes through. On the north end, though, what is the projected, are they going to be doing a fencing area of that area as well for those residents who will be affected by having that in their new site?
Sure. Yeah, Councilmember, on the north end, you can see there's about a 30-foot green strip that's through here. Within that area, it was discussed what to do with the residents at the neighborhood meeting. From the unofficial vote tally at that meeting, they wanted to see a berm and landscaping. So berm would be have a small hill that would be made out of here and planted up. So they'll provide that additional separation here. Most of these homes right here have chain link fences across right now, I believe.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And then the next thing is that if this annexation goes through, when would that traffic study go through? I've just been asked a few times.
Sure. I believe the traffic study would start pretty shortly after the annexation. The clock would be running for them to take action on the environmental assessment worksheet, the traffic study being part of that. So I would think pretty quickly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember House. John, I just have a question. I'm going to go to the other side of it. We annex it in. What if it doesn't happen at all? Is there a liability from a city standpoint after it's already annexed in? Because it can't be annexed, it can't be taken back, right? So then would it just remain farm or ag? And the continuum of that contractor or whoever is renting it out to farm, can that continue? And it would just be city property?
Yeah. At this point, Mayor, the use of the property could continue as is as agriculture. It'd still be owned privately by Best Development, and they could make contracts to farm it. So when we go through an annexation, the ad hoc zoning district we use is agriculture. So our agriculture zoning district would allow for the types of activities that are occurring there at present. So they could use it as is.
Okay, so there's no additional liability to the city once it's annexed in?
I don't believe so. I
Okay.
don't think anything would change. If there's anything on that one, it would be on the development side because the
Okay.
tax structure in the city might be a little higher than the township.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Council? Okay. There is a motion on the floor. All those in favor of that motion state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed to that motion state by saying nay. And that motion prevails.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Second reading, City Code Amendment, Chapter 117, Cannabis and Hemp Licensing. And for this item, we have an introduction by our city attorney, Corey Land. Welcome, Corey.
Phone, if that's all right. Thank you, Your Honor, members of the council. This is where I need John's disclaimer. Viewer discretion is advised. It sounds better in his voice. Tonight, we have a final reading for both our licensing ordinance and the zoning ordinance for cannabis regulations. Just a quick primer on hemp versus marijuana, because I think there's a lot of people don't really understand the difference between the two. The way it all starts is it has its origins in the cannabis plant. I, first of all, am not a scientist, didn't do well in science, in fact, which is why I went to law school. But I did get very, very educated quickly on all things cannabis back in the day when medical cannabis was approved in the state of Minnesota. And so I have learned a lot, and now that this is on a fast track, I've learned even more. So the cannabis plant produces the THC, and that is what differentiates the difference between hemp versus marijuana. Hemp is technically anything with 0.3% or less THC. Marijuana is everything more than 0.3% THC. It really is that simple. In 2018, the federal government decided that they were going to legalize CBD, the cannabidiol. It's a fun word to say. It is found in all cannabis plants. So again, it just depends on whether or not it is 0.3% or less or 0.3% or more. But the CBD is found in all cannabis plants. So the only one that is legal federally is the type of hemp products that are produced that are 0.3% THC or less. So that's federally legal. States have gone completely off the rails as far as whatever the federal government said. States are choosing to do other things with both CBD as well as marijuana. In 2022, the legislature surprised everyone and legalized edible CBD. So prior to this time, it was a little unclear when the federal government that said CBD products. Nobody really knew. I think everybody kind of thought that meant clothing, things that were not necessarily that people would consume, but then obviously that became a thing. And so in 2022, edible CBD with less than 0.3% THC became legal in the state of Minnesota. But they did not have any administrative oversight. They just said, these are some performance standards we're putting in place, but we're not going to regulate it. Really, they do not regulate it at all. The performance standards are, it can't be modeled after a brand of products primarily marketed or consumed to children. As you can see from the products, not sure anybody's complying with that part of the law. It may not be packaged in a way that resembles any kind of commercially available food product. It must be packaged in a container that's child resistant and tamper evident. And there's a limit of the quantity of THC in a package, 5 milligrams of THC per serving and 50 milligrams per package. So as you can see from the gummy bears on the right, 25 milligrams of CBD per gummy. So you get 1/5 of a gummy in the state of Minnesota of that particular product. The Minnesota Alcohol Gambling Enforcement Agency, which is known as AGE, has advised, they have opined, they have dictated that these types of CBD beverages cannot be sold at liquor stores. They can be sold at on-sale establishments, but they cannot be sold at liquor stores because they are considered a food. And unless you are going to add a CBD product to a food, you cannot sell it at a liquor store. That is the law, and they have opined that the beverages themselves, as being a food already, are not allowed to be sold at liquor stores. So that's nothing we can change. We have prohibited it in our ordinance because it is what AGE is enforcing. That doesn't mean that on sale can't sell it. They can. They can sell CBD products. The proposed zoning ordinance introduces all of the CBD businesses for cultivating, manufacturing, testing, wholesale, retail, and medical. That's what we have included in our ordinance. And then what we have done is put them into their proper zoning districts. So for example, in the ag district, we're allowing cultivating, but putting some performance standards on it saying, but you have to have 100 acres or more in order to qualify for that kind of a business in the ag district. We're allowing for retail sales of these. Now, these are just the edible CBD products, so it's 0.3% or less THC. In the C3 community regional and the C4 regional shopping center districts. They must comply with all the performance standards that we're putting in place in those zoning districts, which I'll get to. And then the manufacturing, testing, and wholesale, we're putting in the industrial 2, the I-2 industrial park zoning district. You may say, where are those districts that you're talking about? I don't know what you mean. I don't have my zoning map memorized. Well, here's your zoning map. So if you look at the red, those are your C3. The maroon are the C4 shopping center. And then the dark gray, which is, there's only one little I-2 district. So you can kind of see it right below, right near the blue. So did we see that? Okay, it's a little L shaped. That's the only I-2. So C3, C4 is where your retail could go, and then the dark gray is the I-2, and then of course ag is green. What are our performance standards on the retail? Businesses must require proof of age. Many of these are already in the state law. It cannot be sold to anyone under 21. So must require proof of age and have signage of the age requirement. Products must comply with the labeling and the packaging requirements. We're not sure exactly what that may look like. Right now, we know what's on the books today for these CBD edibles, so they must comply with those requirements. Sales between 8 a.m. and 10 p.m. This is something you can choose to change. It seems to be kind of a common, we don't really want to have these businesses open too early or too late because they do potentially, these retail stores may have some security issues, so it might be nice to have them closed down before it gets too late at night. The products must be behind a counter. You can't have direct contact by the customers until they reach the point of sale. Again, this is in the current law anyway. A security plan approved by the police chief. Many of these retailers will be unable to get bank-approved loans or lending opportunities, and so they will have to be a cash business. And so we think it's very important that the security plan not just include cameras and, whatever kinds of security, on-sale security, people, staff, but also where are your bushes in front of your windows? What kinds of windows and access do you have to your back door? All of those security things that a police chief would look at just to make sure that they have a good security plan for this business to make it safe. And then they have to comply with the compliance checks that we currently do for tobacco and alcohol, so that we can monitor whether or not they are having potentially illegal sales to minors or to anyone under 21. No purchase, use, and possession by anyone under 21. Clerks must be 21 to sell it. That is currently in the state law. No product, now here's a fun one, no product can contain more than 0.3% THC. Obviously, that's the current legal limit, but there's legislation that may alter that. It cannot be sold by vending machines. Again, that goes with the customer contact, have to have an intervention by a clerk. No mobile sales would be allowed. So that means no transient merchants, no peddlers, no special events, no home occupations, and no delivery of these kinds of retail sales. And not allowed at liquor stores or bars. Now, we did take the extra step, not just to say they're not allowed to be sold at off sale, but we also said on sale. And these were direct recommendations from both the Public Safety Advisory Committee as well as the Public Safety Committee of the Council. The licensing ordinance is very similar. Other than the fact that it requires a license. So all of those zoning uses, by the way, require a conditional use permit. So none of them will, sneak in as a permitted use. They will all come before the Planning Commission and Council for approval, so you can put appropriate conditions on them if needed. So every business will also have to be licensed by the city. The applicant will undergo a background investigation. It has your typical license requirements of being a one-year term, no transfer of license from person to person or place to place. The same identical performance standards that are in zoning are in licensing. We are not requiring a license for medical marijuana because that appears to have been completely preempted by the state because they regulate all medical marijuana facilities. And they actually approve manufacturing facilities, and where they go, they're also supposed to be approving the retail locations as well. We do need to discuss what those license fees will be, which will be part 2 after we get through the adoption of these ordinances. Then you can discuss the fees, because if you don't approve these, there's no, why go through the exercise, right? So let's make sure we get through these 2 parts first, and then I'll let Kelly take it away to discuss fees. I'll help. Now, red flag. There is proposed legislation right now, probably as we speak, being amended and added to and changed of adult use cannabis. The state regulation establishes what they're calling the Office of Cannabis Management. And if they do that and they license all things cannabis, that will completely preempt our licensing ordinance. So we will not be able to license these uses. But both in the House and the Senate, they have a provision right now that says that the cities can opt to register these uses. Not quite as enforcement friendly, but what the registration does is it allows you to suspend a license if let's say they're a bad actor and they're not complying with with the state law or your zoning regulations. You can suspend their registration for a period of up to 30 days, but the state's the only one that can actually revoke it. So what they're supposed to do is then they hold a hearing and they figure out whether or not they're going to revoke a license or reverse the suspension. So that's the enforcement mechanism for licensing if the adult use cannabis goes through. It does not allow cities to prohibit uses. One thing we have done in our ordinances is prohibit the delivery, the home occupations, the transient merchants and peddlers, and they would not be allowed at special events. We can't prohibit those things. We can regulate time, place, and manner of them. So that's the one tool that seems to be in both the House and the Senate version, is it allows zoning control as long as you're regulating time, place, and manner. So the reason that I have duplicative performance standards is if the licensing ordinance gets tossed out, we still have all of those performance standards in zoning. And I can point to all of them and argue until I'm blue in the face that they are time, place, and manner regulations, even things related to peddlers and solicitors and special events. I'm not sure that, depending on what ends up in the final state legislation, we may or may not be able to uphold those things, but I'm going to make a good faith effort. It does allow cities, both of the, again, in the House and the Senate, allow cities to adopt a moratorium. So if you want to just call a timeout on anything over 0.3% THC, so maybe you pass this and we keep the regulations on the current CBD edibles, which are the under 0.3% THC, and you want to call a moratorium on everything else until we kind of let the dust settle, you can do that, and they're actually extending the moratorium law an extra long time. So normally you can only have a moratorium for a year. This allows it through January of 2025. So it's almost it'd probably be like a year and a half moratorium if you wanted to do that. So kind of the ordinance, or the parts of our ordinance that may be a little iffy, or that we might have to revisit if the legislation is passed. We can't license uses, but we can register them, so we'll just have to tweak the words. And then we can't have our performance standards in the licensing section. No product can contain more than 0.3% THC. That's not okay unless we call a moratorium. Mobile sales, they're saying that's not okay to prohibit those things, but again, we might be able to regulate them with time, place, and manner restrictions. And then not allowed at liquor stores or bars, they're promising to fix that so they can be sold at liquor stores for sure. They currently can be sold at bars under the current law. That's just our ordinance is prohibiting it at any on-sale establishment. One of the versions has in it that the cities, depending on your size, your population, you can limit the number of retail licenses you offer, retail license and registrations that you offer. And so Hastings would be into the category of you could limit it to 4. You would have to allow at least 4, but you could cap it at 4 if you so chose to do that. So the recommendation at this point, I would say we move forward with the adoption of the 2 ordinances because we don't know for sure what the legislature is going to do. Believe me, I've waffled back and forth with, let's just put the brakes on this and wait and see what they do. And I finally just, we don't know. I mean, it's taken a while for it to get through all the committees that it has. The versions are not the same at the House and the Senate. They have to reconcile that. They have to get through their budget to find out if they can even afford to establish this Office of Cannabis Management. So they have a lot of hurdles to get over before this is approved. I think they probably will do it, but why not go ahead and adopt this and then wait and see what happens. Now, we are suggesting a late implementation to give staff time to kind of get the application forms in place and figure out what it is we need, as well as to notify those that are out there selling it today that this is coming. I mean, it's not fair just to slap it on them tomorrow and say, you're out of business, you're out of business, you're out of business, everybody needs a license. So we thought we better have an education time period, let people know what we expect of them, let them decide whether or not they even want to have a license. They may decide it's not worth it, maybe it's not profitable to them to continue to operate in that, and then they need to sell out their inventory. So July 1st is our suggested implementation date. By then, we will for sure know what the legislature is going to do anyway, and so we can pivot if we need to, or we can just choose to implement, as I said, the part of it that regulates the CBD edibles, and then put a moratorium on anything over 0.3% THC, unless you decide that that's not something that we need to do, and then it would just be legal in Hastings. So I said a lot. Please ask questions.
Thank you, Corey. Council, any discussion? Councilmember Lund.
Thank you, Your Honor. A few questions. Just a matter of language. Does the proposal state current percentage, or does it state the 0.3% explicitly?
I use the 0.3%,
Yeah.
which is not, I mean, that's a very well-established percentage. It dates back to the early 70s, where some scientists said anything less than 0.3% is hemp, anything over 0.3% is marijuana.
Okay.
And so that, I don't anticipate that percentage changing.
Got it. And then So that answers my next one, I think, and I'll just clarify though, is that 0.3% is not being reconsidered in the revision at the state, okay.
No.
You said that a cap of 4 for a city of our size, then let's say there's 4 brick and mortars already that get approved, then that would remove any mobile vendor opportunity effectively.
Yeah, that's a good question, and it depends on how they define retail.
Okay,
Whether it's a brick and mortar or whether a peddler counts as retail.
Okay.
And I did not read through all 100 pages
okay.
of either the House or the Senate version. I tried to pick out the word local authority control and things like that to see what it was we can do, but I'm sure that's a nuance we're going to have to figure out.
Yep, okay. Yeah, it's something obviously to look into. And then I think the big one is, from my perspective, is prohibitive use versus the zoning lever that we could pull. So can you give us an example? And I think you actually mentioned it in one of your final slides where bars may be questionable, but let's just say there's a bar in town. In which situation is it prohibitive uses or zoning that would not be allowed then? Is it zoning would then trump that, or is it the state prohibitive uses then says no bars would be able to?
So the state law does not prohibit it at on-sale liquor establishments. Our ordinance, and from the recommendations of both PSAC as well as the Public Safety Committee, was to prohibit it at on sale. So that's a performance standard, time, place, and manner restriction that we put in our zoning ordinance.
Okay, so just to follow up on that, so what you're saying is then because our ordinance, if passed, would then say this is zoned as such, therefore the prohibitive uses do not apply then?
We're allowing it,
place.
so we're allowing retail uses, just not at on-sale liquor establishments.
Right.
So if we said no retail whatsoever, that would be prohibiting the use. We're just restricting
Got it.
time, place, and manner. Place, in that case.
Councilmember Liefeld.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thanks, Corey. This is really interesting. I'm glad somebody read through all of it and understood all the big words, because I did not. But one thing, and I wanted to kind of comment on something Councilmember Lund said, is that 0.3 piece is kind of, it's a little irrelevant, just because all that's telling us is what's considered THC, right? It's the 5 milligram piece that we're looking at. Other states have, that it can be in 10 milligram edibles up to 100 milligrams per package. So this is just the amount of THC that we can have, 5 milligrams of a THC product in an edible with a max of 50 milligrams in a package, right? That 0.3 thing is just the definition of how do we define THC over CBD. Like the ointment I put on my knee, it's less than 0.3%. It's CBD. It's not THC.
Well, it's 0.3% THC,
But legal as
but
CBD.
it's, correct, legal
Okay.
as CBD.
Okay, so it's that 5 milligram.
It's the intoxicating piece of it.
Okay.
Anything over 0.3% is considered intoxicating.
Perfect, and I think that's important for.
I don't think your knee's gonna feel it so much.
No. Okay, then, one piece, and I am on the committee, Public Safety Committee, and I do want to have a discussion about page 4, section K. I would recommend that we remove the wording in there that prohibits on sale from selling THC beverages.
Was it J or K?
I thought it was K.
So it's in both.
It's in both. In one of
Yep.
them, it's K.
It could be,
And
but yeah,
they
it's,
looked a lot alike to me, those two sections. When I was going back and forth, they looked a lot alike.
well, that's because they are.
That explained it. Because as you had said in your presentation, from a liquor store standpoint, we have no bearing on that right now based on current legislation law.
Correct.
Okay? So we can't affect that.
Nope.
that could change once legislation is done and they figure out what they're doing, okay? So right now, for anyone who's listening, as a city, we can't affect liquor stores from selling it.
Right.
That is out
They
of-
cannot sell
They
it.
cannot sell it.
And we can't help them
can't
allow
say
it.
something here that would change that.
Right.
However, the state does say that bars
Mm-hmm.
can do on sale, which means serve it in their establishment.
Yep,
The state allows that.
correct.
I would propose that we follow that guideline with the state and allow that product to be sold based on these guidelines as an on-sale option for bars and.
And I'll be real honest with you, I think it's tricky for bars to sell it, given the edible labeling and packaging requirements. I'm sure they've figured it out, because they're not supposed to have, direct customer interaction. I don't know if that means it has to be in a tap, or if that means that the customer has to get the can. But somehow, they have to be able to really control the access to it between the server and the customer. So,
What do you mean by that? They have to be able to control the.
is the customer should it come in an open glass, or is the customer supposed to be given the can directly? I don't know, because it's supposed to be sold in a closed container that is tamper resistant and unopened. So, again, I'm not going to pretend like I know how they're actually doing it in on-sale establishments, and I'm not going to regulate it. I mean, I'm not going to tell them how to do it. They just have to comply with the law. That's why I want to just say, just comply with the law. Whatever the Minnesota legislature decides, how that has to be done.
And my reasoning behind this for my fellow council members would be, as far as bars already selling intoxicating beverages, I wouldn't want to exclude, I know people who will only drink, they don't drink alcohol, but they will consume a THC beverage or will consume edibles. To me, an intoxicating beverage is exactly that. I don't see this as a separate topic. So I would, and I don't know what the process is to move to strike that on-sale piece off of our proposed recommendation.
You could do it one of two ways. You could have a discussion at the table, and if you feel like you have enough head nods around the table, you could make the motion to adopt the ordinances striking the prohibition at on-sale establishments.
Okay. Well, I'd like to hear thoughts from my fellow council members, because it can be a real pain to make a motion with an amendment and then have to change that. So let me know your thoughts before I open my big mouth.
Councilmember Lund.
Thank you, Your Honor. And I appreciate that. I think my opinion is baby steps and keep your eye on it. These things can be changed. We're probably going to talk about it again. Maybe even this year, who knows, maybe even next month, to make, modifications to what we may or may not pass tonight. So I guess my thought is, this is it clearly is no one's got a good grip on it, even at the state and federal level. So let's just kind of move into it easily and in environments that are more controlled, and that would be like that retail environment rather, and just, if it's important to our businesses or people that you're talking to from a resident standpoint, then let's look at that as something to amend later, but it's already kind of a lot of new questionable things tossed out there, that this would be one more thing, especially from I don't know what the police chief would say, but I think it poses unique challenges, even though it's intoxicating and so is alcohol and whatnot, that probably best to take it one step at a time, in my opinion.
Thank you, Councilmember Lund. Councilmember House.
Thank you. And just to reiterate to Councilmember Liefeld, I have spoken with a few of the bars regarding on how they have served it, because I've seen in a few different establishments where they do serve those beverages. It is generally done in a closed can, and it generally has a different top of the can as well to be better protected as well. So any of the establishments I've spoken to only serve it in closed cans, just to make a note throughout city. But I would agree with you on that, Councilmember Liefeld, that it should be, we already allow intoxicating drinks on other levels. I don't feel it just to change that, as the legislature will also change drastically soon, I'm sure. I do understand that baby steps are needed, but I don't think that completely not allowing that sale that's already been allowed by the state of Minnesota I think it's a little overreach.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember House. Councilmember Fox.
I have also been following this legislation very closely through the Minnesota Craft Brewers Guild. It's something that we get updates on weekly, and it's something that has its pros and cons for everyone around. It is an interesting concept to have two different intoxicating beverages side by side, and it's really complex and it's really tough. But there are some places that do it well and do it successfully. Like Councilmember House said, they're different containers, right? And there are different beverages. It's not necessarily going to be an alcoholic THC seltzer. Just to be clear about that, it's not like you're getting both in one package. It's also, there are so many alsos I could give you. I would be supportive of this for our local businesses if you would make the amendment, Councilmember Liefeld.
Thank you, Councilmember Fox. Councilmember Pemble.
I guess just listening to the discussion and what fellow council folks have said here, my thought is in 6 weeks or whenever the 20th of May comes up, that there may be something completely different that finishes out of the legislature this year. And I'm looking at this and saying, looking at the time and the effort that staff and yourself have put into this, it's like, do we really want to tweak it something before the legislature has finished and given out their recommendation or set it in law? And to me, it's like, I would rather see us just adopt both of these as they are written at this time and wait for the legislature, because you've already stated that if this succeeds, it's an implementation in July 1, right? So there's time moving forward to address items once the legislature has set it and cast it in concrete. And I would suggest that we just move ahead with the recommendations as stated and wait for the legislature to force us to tweak them.
Thank you, Councilmember Pemble. Councilmember Lund.
Thank you, Your Honor. Councilmember Pemble brings up an interesting point that I didn't consider, and I think, perhaps you can set me straight here. Why wouldn't we just table this until further action by the state? What are the negatives of that?
Your Honor, members of the council, I think we've sort of put ourselves into a little bit of a box because the moratorium expires about now. And so then if you don't adopt anything, anyone can open anything.
Just a quick follow-up.
Sure.
Thank you, Your Honor. Natural question. Can the moratorium be extended by
Till 2025.
3 months or till July 1st or something like that to await this unique timing mismatch.
Your Honor, members of the council, that, again, had we thought of that in advance prior to this meeting, I would say absolutely, you just need to amend your moratorium. But that isn't before you tonight. So if you wanted to do that, you would have had to do it before it expired. And now we don't have enough time before your next meeting.
Thank you, Councilmember Lund. Councilmember Liefeld.
Thank you, Honor. I would like to make a motion that we move ahead on voting on the City Code Amendment, Chapter 117 of Cannabis and Hemp licensing, with the striking of the bars are excluded from on-sale sales. I will follow that up with, I can go up to a smoke shop tonight on my way home and buy 10 different packs of edibles and take them home. If I'm sitting at a bar drinking, I can guarantee you somebody's going to stop me from walking out that door if they're doing their job. I'm not going to walk out that door, that being said, but I feel a whole lot safer having a bartender and a bar owner whose job and a business are on the line, which is what they do every day. They regulate how much, boy, that person is obviously intoxicated, and they cut people off. I feel really comfortable in that, and in what we have in place in the city with our police department for, their, checks, their sting operations and their checks to make sure that our local bars are abiding by that. And to me, this is another revenue source for them. So on that, Your Honor, I make that motion as stated.
Thank you, Councilmember Liefeld. Councilmember House, second. Additional or new discussion? Councilmember Lund.
I hate being the grumpy old man. What happened to Mark? Hope he's listening. Yeah. No, I appreciate that, and it may be making a mountain out of a molehill. But that being said, every time we add a liquor license, every time we have an additional facility that potentially is a law enforcement burden, we really need to consider that. So, what does the police chief and the police department say about this? We haven't necessarily had that conversation with them per se about striking that language, and maybe we have, but from how I understand it, they understand the implications of said ordinance proposal, but not necessarily any modifications to it, especially adding, I don't know how many bars that possibly could have this, and what does that mean? Maybe it's fine, I don't know, but we don't have that. And so that's why I'm saying baby steps. There's no reason why we couldn't in 2 weeks say, hey, you know what? Heard from the chief, we're good to go, and it's like a 30-second conversation that we're having. But instead, I feel like maybe we're doing too much now instead of, these are great questions. We're kind of in a time box, apparently, so, we need to act now on this or there's nothing. Okay? So something is better than nothing, in my opinion. But why can't we look into a couple of these nuances and make better choices later instead of misleading people too and then saying, oh wait, that was a bad idea, they're planning for July 1st, and then we repeal all this stuff or something. I don't know. So kind of rambling, but I still feel maybe that's the end state, but I guess I don't support that being the current decision, in my opinion.
Thank you, Councilmember Lund. Well, I guess he's the grumpy old man. I'm going to be the grumpy old woman. Sorry. I'm cautious. I want to be cautious. I want to be respectful of what the committee and the commission had gone through. They've put a lot of work into it. I think they've looked at all avenues respectfully, and I guess I'm going to, it would be a tie if we went the way we did right now, so the motion would not pass. So I know, but if it wouldn't, but if we openly went this route, we would have more time to talk about it, and we could bring it back in 2 weeks if we find out from the chief. I'm being cautious. And I'm concerned because it's grown so quick, so fast, the state can't even figure it out. And so now we want to have our little city figure it out? Well, that's my opinion. So, anyway, those are my 2 cents and other up for discussion. Councilmember Fox.
This is just questions about the presentation. So sorry to go a different direction. Just a couple clarifying questions. The 4 establishments is if we want to contain it to 4 establishments. Just
That
to
is correct.
totally clarify. Based on our population size, if we would like to, we would be able to.
Yes.
Thank you. Second, is the agricultural language in, perhaps this is outside your purview as well, sorry, in the ordinance the same as the legislature?
No.
Okay, I'm just curious about that.
No, and I'll admit, 100 acres is arbitrary, and other than I did look at Hastings agricultural area, tried to piece together some properties that are contiguous to each other where it could occur. And so I felt like that was, if anybody's going to farm, they're not going to farm 10 acres. They're going to, they need a bigger area to make it profitable and worthwhile. So it felt like, 100 acres was doable in the city. If somebody wanted to cobble that together, they could. And then not allowing retail sales, again, trying not to have too many things going on one property at once. Ag didn't seem like an appropriate place for retail, so that's why that restriction.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fox. Councilmember Pemble.
I go back to the point that nobody seems to have a good handle on what the legislature is going to do in their final resolution, law to this predicament. I'll say that they've set upon the cities. But my fear is we've put a lot of time and effort into this. The moratorium is at its end. And if we start tweaking again, I go back to my original statement. Let's let the legislature finish the session, and then we can tweak it to adjust what the legislature has passed.
Thank you, Councilmember Pemble. Councilmember Lightfoot.
Thank you, Your Honor. Corey, question for you then. So I know we were talking about edibles. Would the way it's written, without any modification, right now it's tobacco shops, would they be able to sell beverages?
They can sell any THC edible product. That is correct. In a can. They can't consume it on site, obviously, but
Is there a limit to how much I can buy there?
The legislature did not put any limits on any edibles. There's the packaging requirement for how much THC quantity per container, but no.
So let me just clarify, and I respect what you guys are saying. The state already says that it is okay for sale of this product. Am I correct?
Yeah, they don't prohibit it.
They
So
don't prohibit it.
It's silent. The law is silent
It's
on
silent,
sale.
but they do prohibit
Yes.
off sale.
Yeah, correct. And so, the tricky thing that you just asked me
Yes.
is basically somebody selling, it's not liquor. So it's not you can't sell this product at a liquor store, right? So a tobacco store is not a liquor store. Therefore, they can sell a THC-infused seltzer because it's not regulated by the off-sale liquor store rules.
Okay. So I'm going to keep my motion as is to allow it to vote. I am going to just clarify the fact then that, again, I can go to the tobacco shop and I can buy edibles and I can buy the beverages and I can take them home and do whatever I want with them. We're saying that our bars that already have a license alone to do that and have so many hoops that they have to go through, we're saying to them right now that, geez, you know what? We don't trust your facilitating this, but we certainly trust the tobacco shops to have their, so my 2 cents is, the state's gonna come out, it could be 6 weeks, it could be 6 months. We have no idea what the state's gonna do, and we know they're moving not real fast. This wormholed its way in the first place, and everybody who wanted it legalized jumped on it immediately. And as a city, I'm looking at it and going, we've got some really fine, responsible bars and restaurants in this town who are playing by the rules and who are following the rules. This is one more revenue for them. That's my point on this, and if we wait 6 weeks or if we wait 6 months for it, and who knows, they may not want to do it. That may be the case, because that'll come in the next conversation with costs, so.
So then, Councilmember Lund.
Sorry, yeah, and I agree with us just voting and moving on from the conversation. I guess the clarifier that I want to put in there is there is no definitive what it is. We're not just waiting for a time period for the state to do something. We're waiting for what it is as well. We're having this conversation right now about making changes to a proposal. There's 100% chance that there's going to be a lot of people standing up at the House and speaking and making proposed changes or negotiating with each other and whatnot. So what she's showing us here is just what's been laid out, but it's going to get picked apart and tweaked and changed and whatnot with all these different things. So we could be, again, misleading our fine businesses of what we're going to be able to do and they're preparing for and whatnot too. So I don't disagree that there's responsible businesses, that this is a revenue stream and so forth. That said, I just feel like the unknown really makes it kind of a backwards way to go into this. And so you almost have to go kind of more cautiously so you're not stepping in it, if that makes any sense. And to emphasize that, this did sneak in, right? This did sneak in, and it made the news. And people probably were embarrassed that it snuck in through, underneath their nose, and they didn't realize what they're voting for and so forth. And so they may be extra motivated to have these conversations and put more limitations and restrictions on this too at the legislative level. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. But so that's why I say let's just go with this because it's something instead of letting it expire and we have nothing. And we can go back in and say, yes, we do have responsible businesses and this is reasonable now that we've had a beat to think about it. And we can go back and say, now we know what the state is or isn't going to do, or maybe it is 6 months and we're like, okay, well, you know what, this is ridiculous, so let's just do something on our own. That's where I'm at.
Thank you, Councilmember Lund. Any other discussion, Council? There is a motion on the floor. Up for a second. Councilmember House, second. New discussion. Okay, all those in favor of the motion on the floor state by saying aye. Aye. Did you get that? Opposed to that motion state by saying nay. Nay. It's a tied vote. Do we need to call it, Kelly? You got it? Okay. So that motion does not prevail. Thank you. For right now. Councilmember Lund.
So that was a motion for...
Oh, that was just the licensing piece. We still have to do zoning.
Yes.
I forgot.
But also that was a modification to...
That's true.
So I'm going to actually make a motion that we approve what was put in front of us.
Okay. And a second by Councilmember Pemble. Discussion, Council. All those in favor of that motion state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed to that motion state by saying nay. That motion prevails. Thank you.
Now
Now we
zoning.
can go into zoning.
You've already heard all of the stuff in the zoning, so.
Okay, So then I would accept a motion to approve an ordinance for the City of Hastings, Minnesota, amending Hastings City Code Chapter 34.0 Fee Schedule City Clerk. Oh, sorry. Zoning, sorry. Councilmember Leifeld and Councilmember Pemble. Additional discussion, council. Okay, all those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. Aye. Aye, opposed to that motion state by saying nay. And that motion prevails. First reading of the city code amendment, the fee schedule. Kelly.
My apologies, I do not have a slide for you, but I know it's in your materials. So this would accompany the license portion of the fee, the licensing portion, should that survive our legislature. And there was some discussion among the Public Safety Commission about the fee specifically for the retail license. The other fees are similar to what we're seeing in the legislature or what we already have on the books right now. So we have an investigation fee. This is a one-time fee, similar to what we charge folks pursuing a tobacco license or a liquor license, and it's a one-time fee. So they pay a larger fee up front once, and then annually when they renew, they aren't charged an additional fee for the background check. The retail license fee, as proposed, was $10,000 per year. The fee for the other businesses is proposed at $200. That's roughly the amount that I think the state is discussing at this point. Same with the cultivation license. So those are the license fees that we have proposed at this time, and I would be happy to stand for any questions that you have.
Thank you, thank you, Kelly. Councilmember House.
Thank you, Kelly. Can you, by chance, if you have this, I completely understand if you don't, do you know what the retail license price is for liquor in our city?
$4,200 a year.
$4,200. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember House. Councilmember Fox.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Your Honor. I am on the Public Safety Committee, and we had extensive conversation about this. And then I had the opportunity to talk to some businesses that are interested in potentially being retailers, and just sharing information, trying to get some feedback. Unfortunately, this was not information I had prior to that committee meeting. $10,000 is inhibitive to the people who are interested in being retailers. And when we had our committee meeting, it came up briefly, and I know the extensive research that was done, it's comparable, correct me if I'm wrong, please, to communities near us. And that was something we were kind of interested in matching. So today I would like to make a motion to approve this at $8,000 as a slight amendment. And I think that is it's still high. It's still within the ballpark of some of the communities we're around. I know it was one of the numbers that the commission threw out there as well. It maybe is even a little bit more attainable for some retailers. And part of the reason, just to give a little bit more background as well, that the Public Safety Commission wants it to be a strong fee is because we want strong businesses to come out and be retailers. So we want serious companies who are interested in selling healthy, strong, safe product, right? So I wanted to honor that request and also the research that was put into it with my amendment. So.
Thank you, Councilmember Fox. And a second, okay. Councilmember Lund.
Thank you, Your Honor. It's interesting. I guess, okay, so it was $4,200 for what?
Liquor license annually.
Liquor license, okay, and,
The on-sale, sorry.
Yep.
The on-sale liquor license. All the other liquor licenses are much less. The on-sale is the largest one that we have.
One more
Okay.
time, could you state that? I'm sorry.
yep,
Yes.
A
The
bar.
on-sale liquor
Yes.
license is $4,200
Right.
annually. The other liquor licenses, so for off-sale or beer, wine, that kind of thing, are significantly less than that.
And what's the, aside from, and that's an interesting point, is, the fee can maybe weed out, no, oh gee, that was. That's gonna make a,
Wow. It's going to be good.
jeez.
on the replay.
Yeah, that's going to be a replay. Sift out maybe the less qualified or quality retailers. That's possible, and it doesn't necessarily equal that. But what is the other justification for that? I mean, is it the liability and costs that city actually incurs by having said establishment versus, on versus off sale or whatever? Is that the driving factor behind the logic, or?
Behind the logic.
I'm talking
for-
about liquor, alcohol
Okay.
liquor, yeah.
You're talking about liquor fees?
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand how we get to any number.
So those were set prior to my arrival. My understanding is that some of those things are related to risk. There are responsibilities that we have to do annual compliance checks with all of those establishments, liquor and tobacco. So we're required to do some work alongside that license that we issue to folks and make sure that they're complying with all of the licensing requirements that we have.
So I guess okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, if I might interrupt, Councilmember Lund. There's also a lot of enforcement issues with on-sale establishments that are actually serving, because there's just more activity involved in that, as opposed to just the sale at a liquor store where it leaves the building in its container without being consumed.
Yeah.
When it is consumed on site, there's automatically more public safety issues, and there's more cost to the city.
Yeah.
In trying to figure out what the appropriate dollar number would be for this particular license for THC-infused products, edibles or beverages, we have a lot more enforcement even than liquor, because now not only are they doing compliance checks, but they are also monitoring every single package of the products. And so that's going to take more time, more enforcement. And so it felt like not just that we need some responsible owners who know what they're selling in the quantities that they're selling to make sure that it's appropriate, but now we have to make sure that they're doing it too. And so the enforcement cost had to go up. It's going to take more time.
Yeah. So thank you for that. So I think, not to say 10,000 or 8,000 is arbitrary, it is a little bit, right? It just needs to be more and significantly so. So I guess I don't know what that extra $2,000 is getting us, or what we're, obviously it's giving us $2,000 more, but is there any, are we hurting ourselves in that regard? I don't hear that, and maybe we'll learn that later and we need to bump it up in a year. So I guess I would support a reduction. It's still significantly higher than any other fee in that nature, so. I'll second your 8,000 if it hasn't been already.
It's already seconded. Councilmember Pemble.
Locally, where are we at with other jurisdictions? Are they at $7,500, $10,000? Where are they at?
Your Honor, members of the council, the only other two communities that I'm aware of that have adopted regulations for CBD products are Cottage Grove and Woodbury, so sort of moving to your north, and they are both at 10,000 or more for the license.
I guess the one thought I do have is, okay, if it's, everybody around us is at 10,000 or more, and we say we're going to reduce it because we don't want to have, we want it to be more friendly for the business owner who's going to sell this. But does it not also bring the opportunity for, okay, well, I was going to go start a business in Cottage Grove, but they're at X dollars. I could come to Hastings and it's $2,500 less or whatever. I think it needs to be somewhat uniform. And if our neighbors are at 10 grand plus, I think we should stay at that 10 grand situation.
Thank you, Councilmember Pemble. Okay. Councilmember House.
Yeah, I would just like to agree that I think it is pretty restrictive for businesses at that point to have it at $10,000, seeing that we're doing liquor licenses, which very different in how we need to regulate them, of course. But I do think that's high, and we are a smaller community than Cottage Grove and Woodbury. We are quite a bit smaller, so I think that the 8,000 to me, I think is a doable amount. I still think it's high, which is good, because we do want really well-established and safe places to be built, so.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember House. There is a motion and a second on the floor. If we're ready, all those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. 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 Opposed to that motion state by saying nay. Nay. And that motion prevails. Thank you, Kelly. Okay, under administration, strategic planning facilitators. And for this item, Dan Waticha will give us an update.
Thank you. Over a couple of meetings, we've progressed through, do we do another round of strategic planning? What do we want out of that? And based off of those prior discussions, I talked with direct solicitation with two consultants, both who we have some prior experience working with, and looked at sort of the blended approach, something that was more than just goals, projects, but also something that was less than super complicated, comprehensive, multiple meetings, try to have something that was manageable. Council did indicate that they wanted part of the process to involve some sort of problem identification, sort of a matter of what are we trying to work with in setting some goals. They also, Council, you talked about wanting to make sure that the end product had some deliverables, something, as simple as a report, but also a matter of something that we can implement and work from, have some metrics, and how do we gauge progress and success. Both proposals, one with Chad Weinstein, Ethical Leaders in Action, the other Craig Rapp of Rapp Consulting Group, I think both would accomplish that. You have the proposal materials in your packet, and would recommend that Council choose one of the facilitators to move forward with. With that, I can certainly take some questions.
Thank you, Dan. Councilmember Liefeld.
Thank you, Your Honor. I don't know, Dan, it seems to me that it might be best suited if we left this up to staff to figure out. Decide who you feel, you're asking us to pick from two prized cows here, It's like, I think, who do you feel, based on any meetings that you've had or any experiences that you've had, that as a city, as a staff, that you feel you would work really, really well with, or who you feel would work well with us, knowing our personalities. I mean, I open up to anyone else who has an opinion on it, but I don't feel educated enough on either of these two companies to choose other than based on their logo. So, I would really defer this to staff to say, hey, as we mentioned in our workshop, there's areas where we want to, we rely on you guys, and this is, I think, out of my area of expertise. So that would be my thought process anyway, Dan.
Thank you, Councilmember Liefeld. Councilmember Pemble.
I would agree. I think that, you're familiar with at least the contacts folks at these two two organizations. Pick what you think is best that fits into our time frame. I mean, I guess I wouldn't look at saying, okay, if one can do it when we want it done and the next one has to be in the next calendar year, forget that. We'll go with the one who we can get in this time period.
Thank you, Councilmember Pemble. Councilmember House.
I would agree. I think that I've never spoken to either company either or had any due diligence in knowing them other than their logo, so I just agree on that stance as well.
Thank you, Councilmember House. Councilmember Fox.
Councilmember Liefeld.
Councilmember Layfield.
That being said, Dan, I do want to state that if for any reason this wasn't a highly successful venture, we wouldn't blame you for that, okay? I feel like you might feel like you're being set up right now, and I don't want you to feel that way for us to be able to go back and say, but Dan, you said this. That is not why we're doing this. If it, I think it's going to be highly successful, but if it wasn't, we certainly wouldn't take that out on you, sir.
Thank you, Councilmember Layfield. Councilmember Fox. Or do you want to talk? Go ahead.
This is fine.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. After reading the proposals, I thought I at least had a great experience with Mr. Weinstein with Ethical Leaders in Action. But that said, I'm always open to a new experience, and I think the other proposal looked thorough and well laid out. But I think that they hit the high notes that we asked you for in our last conversation about what we wanted to see out of a strategic planning session. So I would love to work with RAP.
Thank you, Councilmember Fox. Councilmember Lund.
Thank you, Your Honor. I believe Councilmember Liefeld and I have both worked with both of them.
Yes, you have.
So there is some history regardless, and I know not everybody has, but with that said, I think you threw me for a loop. I didn't think that was going to be the conversation, but yeah, I guess I think it's an interesting thought to have you leverage your communications and your kind of your gut feel and make that call. I think we've expressed our desires for outcome and process, and I guess I would say I'm fine with whomever you truly feel is best. On paper, I think it's hard to gauge because one appears to be more in line with what I'm thinking, but not necessarily the things that aren't on paper that you may know about that aren't captured in the proposals per se. And my experience with both of them isn't markedly different, where I would say absolutely not this one or the other one. So I didn't give you anything other than I guess I'm good with whatever you choose as well.
I would have to agree. I mean, I think our last session went well, and we got a really nice strategic movement going, and the process was good and fun, and I guess my concern would be is I'd rather see it done sooner than later. So and on budget, as Councilmember Lund stated. Okay. So we don't really have a motion then, other than for Dan to move forward.
I would recommend that I would request you make a motion. I laughed. It was certainly not my thought that there was any sort of blame, but I appreciate the sentiment that I'm safe. I'll tell you, my recommendation would be Craig Rapp. I could work with either, but I think it would produce a better deliverable. Where I do think a motion is important is, as much as Councilmember Lund refers to on budget, this is not a budgeted item. So I think it's important for council to say,
Fair.
make a decision or authorize my going forward and making a decision simply because that budget piece is something that you would need to fill afterwards.
Councilmember Layfield.
Okay, that being said, based on Dan's opinion, I'd like to make a motion that we proceed with contacting RAP Consulting Group based on city recommendation, staff recommendation.
And second by Councilmember Fox. Any additional discussion, council? All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed to that motion state by saying nay. And that motion prevails. All right, we look
you
forward
much.
to that.
That'd be good.
Dan, you may move forward on the Public Works Director.
Yeah, this one has a history, goes back year and a half or even longer. When Public Works Director Nick Egger took a different position summer '21, we advertised to hire a new Public Works Director, and we were not thrilled with what we got out in the job market. Brought it back to the Operations Committee and then also the City Council and talked about, let's do an interim, give us some time. Hopefully the market gets better. But Council had some concerns about, are we overburdening the department by leaving a position vacant? Had some concerns about Ryan Stimsky. As much as we appreciate him, he is an employee of Focus Engineering, and although we treat him as one of our own, he's not a city employee, and I know that gave pause to some of the council members about an appointment to director position. And then the other thought was just sort of the buying some time for maybe the market would get better. I think we've seen a few things in that past year and a half. We did extend the interim piece too for a few months here at the end of the year. But I think we've seen a couple of things. One, Ryan has done, and the department have done a fantastic job over the last year and a half. So we really have not overburdened the department, leaving it short-staffed. There's some mechanisms built into there that we have some cushion in the budget that we can hire in some additional engineering work, maybe with GIS or project management, and that relieves some burden on the department overall. Maybe not Ryan directly, but it helps the entire department. We've also seen, besides not burdening the department, they've worked extremely well with some big and complex projects, some changes in staffing with retirements, and they're to a certain extent, if it's working, why change it? But also a matter of in there, Ryan has certainly reinforced or reproven himself with partners such as MnDOT or Dakota County, MPCA, and also leadership within the department itself. He has the trust and respect of the people he works with on a daily basis. I don't think that the market's changed. It's working well. My recommendation is that we essentially remove that interim tag and name Ryan Stimsky as our Public Works Director. And recognize that the approval of appointments rests with the City Council. So bring that to you tonight. You can certainly take any questions that you might have. I do want to note this was discussed a week or two ago at the Operations Committee and had the committee support also. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Councilmember Lund.
Thank you, Your Honor. So Ryan's been here a long time, or, reasonably long time. He's got a lot of experience. He knows the city. To Dan's point, he has made a lot of built a lot of important relationships in and outside of the city, not just in his capacity within the city, but in his other roles. So I think that's brings a lot of value. He's definitely a good leader, and people do respect him, I can tell. And he does work well with the team. So for those reasons, it makes it hard to not say yes to that. On top of that, we have, from a public works and operations standpoint, we just have a mountain of things that are coming our way that are far too important and critical to do any, OJT for a new person or whatever. I mean, really. Great conversation to have at some point, perhaps, but not the time, in my opinion, in our history to do that. Now, I will say, though, that the reason this is even being discussed, just to ground everybody, you said it, but just to ground everybody, he's not an employee, he's a contractor. Yet he's also potentially going to be placed as a non-temporary leader of a department at the city, which isn't necessarily common or preferred. But for all the things I just said, I think it kind of makes it the exception and not the rule. And I think that's what I want to make sure that we hear, at least, is let's not make it the rule. It is the exception, and that's been a concern of others on the council in the past as well, that we don't just throw it around like it's meaningless. It means something, and there's value to being an employee of the city, but that's not what we have right now. And so I think my point stands, but I would support that. Okay. It's a motion.
Second, Your Honor.
And second motion by Councilmember Liefeld. Additional discussion, council? All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. 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 Opposed to that motion state by saying nay. All right, thank you. Council, any announcements?
I have
Councilmember Liefeld.
I had one, Your Honor, but in 8 minutes, the Dairy Queen closes, and today was free ice cream cone day at the Dairy Queen, and I'd like you all to know that I won't be getting my free ice cream cone.
Well, then I'm going to keep you longer.
I hope everybody else made it out to get their free ice cream cone.
Great. I have a few. Coffee with a Cop is tomorrow, Tuesday, March 21st, from 10 to noon at Froth and Cork. The Friends of Pleasant Hill Library has a used booked sale going on March 23rd to the 26th. Athletic gear swap on Saturday, April 1st. Please ensure items are in fair condition, clean, and usable. Applications for 2023 Community Investment Fund project proposals are open, with a first review of applications set for March 31st. The city created the CIF last year to encourage and support community partnerships and community-driven projects. Happy birthday next week to Councilmember Pemble. Meetings, Tuesday, March 21st, which is tomorrow, Heritage Preservation Commission, 7 p.m. Monday, March 27th, Planning Commission, 7 p.m. Parks Committee, Monday, April 3rd, 5:30 p.m. City Council Workshop, which is the 5-year Parks Plan, and 7 p.m. City Council regular meeting. With that, I would stand for a motion to adjourn. Councilmember Pemble, Councilmember Liefeld. All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. 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 Opposed to that motion state